Welcome to the College of Arts and Sciences virtual 3-minute thesis competition. I'm Katie Cooper. I'm the Associate Dean for Faculty and Staff for the College of Arts and Sciences, and I'm also an Associate Professor of Geophysics in the School of the Environment. The 3-minute thesis, or the 3MT, as it's called for short, is a research communication competition that was developed by the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia. PhD competitors must present a compelling oration on their thesis and its significance. But to throw a wrench in things, the competitors have only 3 seconds and not a second more to share their thesis. In 3MT, if the competitors keep talking past that point, they're then disqualified. There will be a 3-minute countdown timer displayed on each competition slide so you can watch the time countdown as it happens. If a technical complication does happen, that's no fault of the competitor, the person will be allowed to restart though. 3MT challenges students to consolidate their ideas and their research discoveries so they can be presented to a non-specialist audience. Today's first place winner will receive a $1,000 award. The college's second place winner will receive a $750 award, and the People's Choice winner will receive a $500 award. During today's intermission, audience members will receive a pop-up ballot to vote on the People's Choice Award. But perhaps even more important, the winner from today's competition will represent the College of Arts and Sciences at the University 3MT event, which will stream on Friday, March 25th. Winners from each college will compete for prizes that are a lot higher. The winner will receive $3,000, second place $1,500, and $500 for the third place. More on the 3-minute thesis can be found at 3mt.wsu.edu. Now it's time to meet the judges and then the competitors. So judges, as I call your name, go ahead and turn on your cameras and give a little wave to the crowd. So thank you to the following for being judges. First off, we have Asif Cousins. Asif, do a little wave, thank you. Asif is a professor in the School of Biological Sciences. He's also the Associate Director of Research for the School of Biological Sciences and the coordinator of the PNNL WSU Distinguished Graduate Research Programs. Dr. Cousins' research lab focuses on understanding how plant metabolism responds to changes in climate conditions. Specifically, they study the adaptation of photosynthesis to differences in temperature, water, and nutrient availability. Thank you, Asif. Next up, we have JJ Hardy. JJ, give a little wave. Thanks, JJ. JJ is an engineering technician for the Department of Fine Arts. In his position, JJ works hands-on with students in the Fine Arts 3D area to help construct physical objects based on conceptual ideas. He runs several areas in the department, including the wood shop, a metal shop, foundry, and the digital fabrication lab. JJ's personal artwork focuses on consumer objects that are either abandoned or obsolete and then reworked into something new. And finally, we have Courtney Meehan. Hey, Courtney. And Courtney is the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies. In her role as Associate Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Meehan fosters research, scholarship, and creative activity for the faculty in arts, humanities, social science, life, and physical sciences. She's also a professor in the Department of Anthropology, where she utilizes an evolutionary life history approach to understanding how early environments influence child development, human milk composition, and maternal infant microbiomes. Thanks, Courtney. The judges will give the scores based on the comprehension and content, as well as engagement and communication. After the 7 competitors are finished, the scores will be collected and tallied. The average for each will give us a clear winner. In the case of an apparent tie, the highest score in the comprehension and content section will be the winner. And the decision of this adjudicating panel will be final. All right, now for the competitors. And we'll announce you in the randomized order that you'll present. So as I announce your name, go ahead and turn on your camera and give a little wave, just like the judges did. First up, we have Shaptarshi Rajan Shirkar in the Department of Physics and Astronomy.
Hi.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Next, we have Aditi Dahia from the Department of Chemistry. Good to see you. Maggie Reese from the Department of Chemistry. Rachel Perrier from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. We have Furkan Chakmak from the School of Politics, Philosophy, and Public Affairs. We have Jessica Dixon from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. And Zoya Garbani Shiade from the Department of Physics and Astronomy. Welcome all. After all the competitors are finished, the judging is complete and we have the results. I'll then announce the winners. But now, with further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the competitors and why we're here. And I'll make sure that the slide gets pulled up. So remember, competitors, as I call your name, turn on your camera and unmic yourself to get ready for the presentation. So we're starting off with Shaptarshi Rajan Shirkar, who'll be presenting on turbulence through the lens of quantum fluids.
Thank you, Katie. Have you ever been mesmerized with the formation of those brightly colored swirls on the surfaces of soap bubbles? Or maybe you have thought that you have had enough of being tossed inside an airplane after the captain announces turbulent conditions for a short while. Well, we have turbulence, the phenomenon known as turbulence, to blame for both of those conditions. Broadly speaking, all flows can be categorized into two conditions. Like firstly, they can either be laminar, which is ordered, or they can be turbulent, which is disordered everywhere. While the former, the laminar one, can be modeled to high precision with the current models, the turbulent one has presented us with considerable challenges. However, upon scaling up the number of particles that we are dealing with, we can see some emergent phenomena that come out, which we can then use to model or to predict some of the behavior. This is something which we can commonly see in the weather models. Like with the current physical models, we can actually track each and every single molecule of air up to a very high precision. But when we scale it up, we quickly start requiring more and more memory than we have atoms in the universe, which is obviously not tractable, right? But still we have models which give us predictions which are quite accurate, like up to a few weeks in advance. And that's something I'm going to use in my research. Okay. So a key feature of turbulent systems is they have this circular artifacts or patterns that we see, which are commonly termed as vortices, the swirls which I mentioned earlier, right? The amount of vortices, if it can be measured, gives or provides us with a one-to-one correspondence with the amount of turbulence contained with it. Now, quantum fluids, that's the material that I'm interested with. It's just a novel state of matter, which are essentially atoms cooled down to extremely low temperatures in the nanokelvin range. Now, upon perturbing or disturbing such quantum fluids, they become turbulent, and the turbulence gives rise to this underlying vortex structures that I talked about. Now, unlike the classical turbulent structures that we see, the quantum ones actually have a simplification, which is that they can be counted. Now, once we can count the number of quantum vortices, so the quantized vortices, we can develop statistics for them. And statistical mechanics, on the other hand, then helps us in extracting the thermodynamic properties like density and current, which are macroscopic quantities and can be measured very easily. So we propose that using a turbulent system or turbulent fluid as a medium, along with a prescription for counting the underlying vortices, we can effectively capture the amount of disorderness, which is going to be the amount of turbulence contained within the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shaptarshi. Our next contestant is Additive Dahia, who will present on a rational approach to create proto-replicators and self-replicating polymers.
Thank you. Self-replicating polymers depends entirely on templates, subunits, and my job is to understand the self-assembly. To do so, I synthesize molecules which can interact with each other through intermolecular hydrogen bonding, like these. These molecules have two different types of units. One of the part is the head, which is going to interact with the complementary part. And the second part is the a dye, which is going to be fluorescent in nature. Since my whole molecule is going to be fluorescent in nature, I'll be able to find out the rate when the dimer is formed. The molecule in itself has free electron pairs, due to which we see N to pi star transitions. But when the dimer is formed, those free electrons are involved in the hydrogen bonding. So I'll be able to find out the rate through FPS experiment. And with those, I can find the thermodynamic parameters like enthalpy, Gibbs free energy, and entropy. In the center, you are looking at the synthetic plan, the first plan on synthesizing the dye part, which is going to be fluorescent in nature, and then we put the heads on. Not only this, we also synthesize the heads as well. So this also led us to investigate a different type of tectons synthesis, in which we use the same heads but attach it to the aminobenzoic acid, which are going to be used to synthesize this artificial peptide by attaching it to some random amino acid. So here you are looking at an example of a trimer peptide, which I'll be synthesizing. So since I have talked a lot about the rates of changes, we are also going to investigate these through computational studies. Here you are looking at the HF and DFT calculations through which I was able to synthesize, able to make the HOMO and LUMO, which are the highest molecular orbitals and the lowest molecular orbitals. And here I did the HF and DFT calculations on the this tecton, which is the DAD. It's the donating of the hydrogen bond. And as you can see that HF and DFT has a huge difference in the energies, because DFT is much more closer to the actual aspect of the actual picture of a molecule. So since I am changing these molecules by changing the X atom over here through carbon, silicon, and germanium, therefore I found the DFT calculations on both of them, and find a huge difference when I change the atom from carbon to silicon and to germanium. There's not a lot of difference through germanium, but we're still trying to find out more. So with that, I would like to thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Aditi. Up next is Maggie Reese, and the title of her presentation is Biomineralization for Effective Remediation of Radionuclides in the Environment.
The demand for clean energy sources is increasing drastically due to the current economic state of global affairs and the growing burden of reducing anthropogenic climate change. 79% of energy produced in the US in 2020 came from fossil fuels, 12% from renewables like wind and solar, and the other 9% from nuclear energy. Despite almost half of our emission-free energy coming from nuclear power, many Americans are wary of new plants and reactors being developed. This is because of the unique relationship that nuclear has to weapons of mass destruction and the influence of disasters like 3 Mile Island in 1979, Chernobyl in 1986, and more recently, Fukushima in 2011. And so today, the efforts of nuclear regulators are to ensure that multiple barriers are in place to prevent accidents that could lead to further disasters that cause environmental contamination of radioactive material. Part of this includes remediation effects of legacy sites that were contaminated from weapons testing during the Manhattan Project and the Cold War era, in addition to nuclear waste storage facilities that are leaking, like Washington's own Hanford site. Now, these pathways for removing radioactive metals typically fall into one of 4 categories: physical, chemical, biological, and more recently, nanomaterials. My thesis work combines the chemical, biological, and nanomaterial routes. The 3 steps of this remediation technique are as follows. First, a bacterium that is native to the contaminated area will be dispersed throughout the site. Second, phosphates that exist on the bacteria's surface will chemically bind to the metal, forming a material that will not redissolve. And last, because the metal is chemically bound, the bacterially grown nanominerals will prevent further discharge of the radionuclides. And while this strategy is very simple and straightforward, we need to be absolutely sure that the last step is true for the lifetime of the radioactive species, which can be up to millions of years. So my research is to fundamentally study the nanomaterial recovered from bacteria in terms of soil mobility, groundwater solubility, and overall thermodynamic stability to ensure that this method of remediation will stop the heavy metal contamination in its tracks. And this is because material at the nanoscale brings in unique properties of reactivity and mobility that larger materials do not have. And so part of my work will also include developing a benchmark for all of these categories from similar nanoparticles that were made synthetically to determine if the product recovered from the bacteria is more or less effective than traditional chemical techniques. From that point, we can consider scaling up this process for real-world applications. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Maggie. Up next, our next contestant is Rachel Perrier, and she'll present on third-degree analogs to continued fractions.
When you first learned about fractions in school, it was probably a situation like this. You have a pie that's cut into 5 slices, and if you have 2 of them, you get 2/5 of the pie all to yourself. And so through this, you learned that a fraction was a way to represent part of a whole. Where my research looks at is something called a continued fraction. And you can think of continued fractions like the Russian nesting dolls of mathematics. So Russian nesting dolls, if you're familiar with them, they're wooden dolls that fit one inside of the other. Similarly, continued fractions is we're going to nest fractions inside of each other using addition. So for instance, we have an example on the screen here of a continued fraction. It's like we took the fraction 1/1, and its denominator, we added the fraction 1/6. And in that one's denominator, we add the fraction 1/1. That denominator, we added 1/6, and so on and so forth. And so instead of using these to represent part of a whole, the amazing thing is that continued fractions can represent any real number. So 2/5, we have a continued fraction representation, but we only nest a finite number of fractions inside of each other. All irrational numbers also have continued fraction representations, such as things like pi or the square root of 2. The only difference is we're going to nest an infinite number of fractions inside of each other. So for instance, here's the example of -3 plus the square root of 15. So this is the decimal part of the square root of 15. And we have a way we can represent it just using fractions. And so when we look at continued fractions, we look for patterns. So we like the ones like this on the screen where we have this repeating pattern of 1, 6, 1, 6, 1, 6, and we try to figure out which numbers are going to give us this nice repeating pattern. They can also be used for amazingly accurate approximations. So for instance, if we took this fraction on the screen and we stopped adding in our denominators at a certain point, we would have a very good approximation for -3 plus the square root of 15. And so this can be used in computer systems in order to get good calculations when it's doing it, because computers can't actually calculate using the infinite number of decimal places, but they can use a good approximation. They've also been used to test how strong cryptosystems are. So more specifically, my research delves into what happens if we look at doubles or triples of numbers and put them through the algorithm to create a continued fraction and see how they interplay with each other at the same time. And when they're interplaying with each other, what we're trying to look for is, okay, what types of pairs of numbers are going to give us the repeating patterns that we want to find? What types of numbers can we approximate? We also like to see how these can connect to other areas of mathematics, such as combinatorics, or also even other fields such as physics. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rachel. Up next, we have Furkan Chakmak with his presentation titled "When Losing Matters: Emotions, Media Choice, and Effective Polarization."
Hi, I want to start with the picture that you are seeing right now, which was taken inside the Capitol building on January 6, 2021. In this picture, the Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman is confronting a group of angry protesters who are trying to enter the Senate chamber. While he was able to resolve the issue without any harm, the events on January 6 led to 5 deaths. Unfortunately, events like this are occurring more often today. In fact, we political scientists have a term for this hostility called affective polarization. This term is used to define the level of hostilities between partisan groups. So as polarization rises, hostility rises as well. While we know that affective polarization is causing hostility, we are still debating on what causes affective polarization. Especially, there is disagreement on whether media can be one of the causes. My research tries to tackle this challenge by explaining the motivations behind media consumption and media choice. This will help us explain when media is likely to cause polarization. To do that, I bring the role of emotions into my research and into the relationship between media choice and affective polarization. In my research, I ask, is there a relationship between emotional state and media choice, as well as how does media choice influence affective polarization? My main argument is that emotions will determine when partisans will expose themselves to news media to be polarized. So their willingness to be polarized will increase as they experience more negative emotions. To test my claims, I have a mixed method approach. I first analyze existing data sets where I investigate media habits of voters before and after political events, such as elections. Next, I carry out survey experiments to see how they emotionally react to those events. I also analyze how they utilize media to regulate those reactions. Finally, I have the interview phase where I talk with partisans to discover discrete emotions common in politics, such as anger, disappointment, happiness. My initial survey experiment actually showed that when exposed to an event where there are winners and losers, people and partisans on the losing side will be more likely to experience negative emotions. Thus, they will choose entertainment media rather than news media to improve their negative moods. As a result, my research shows that emotions are the defining factor on media habits of partisans. Overall, I think this research has the potential to better understand why polarization is on the rise today. More importantly, it can provide real-world solutions on how to decrease hostilities, increase deliberation, and cooperation in politics. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Furkan. Moving on, we have Jessica Dixon, and she will present on the overlays of Riordan arrays.
Hello all. Learning how to count, you probably started by using your fingers. Maybe you needed to use your toes too, but eventually you ran out of digits and you had to use other tools to help you enumerate. Well, the field of combinatorics continues that process, providing us with more and new methods of counting collections of objects. For instance, consider your WSU password. There's a lot of ways that you could make this password up. Even a simple 5-letter password has over 1 million possibilities. Your WSU password has a minimum length requirement of 10 digits. You need to have lowercase letters, you need to have uppercase letters, you need a number, you need a special character. I wouldn't be surprised if they started asking us to throw emojis in there at some point. Counting the number of possibilities this generates without the framework that combinatorics provides would be near impossible. I use combinatorics to count in a 2-dimensional sense. Before you lies Pascal's triangle. In its rows, you can find the coefficients in the expansion of any binomial expression. So consider x plus y. If you raise this to the 0 power, you'll get 1, that's the top row. If you take x plus y and raise it to the 1st power, the coefficients are just 1 and 1, that's the next row down. X plus y squared gives you the following row, and so on all the way through. There's a pattern that Pascal's triangle is famous for. Every number in this array is actually the sum of the 2 numbers directly above it. So for instance, 15 is a sum of 5 and 10. There's other patterns like this as well. For instance, if you take the sum of certain diagonals, you're going to end up with like the Fibonacci numbers. I like to think of these patterns in a slightly different way though. I want a pattern that's going to give me 0 or is going to annihilate my array. So in Pascal's triangle, what I want to do is I want to take the negative of every number and then add it to the 2 numbers above it. So I'm going to take negative 15 and add it to 5 and 10 to get 0. This is a pattern that I can overlay anywhere in Pascal's triangle and always get zeros out. My research focuses on applying this sort of zeroing out method to different types of arrays, specifically what's known as Riordan arrays. The study of Riordan arrays is a very fast-growing field. It has applications not only in combinatorics, but graph theory, networks, data analysis, just to name a few. Pascal's triangle that we see here is the canonical example of a Reardon array. It originally motivated the field in the 90s, but Reardon arrays are traditionally described column-wise by their generating functions. However, they can also be described with a pattern like we saw in Pascal's triangle. These patterns can take on many different forms, even be infinite. My research focuses on exploring the corresponding zeroing representations that exist and whether or not they even could exist and those requirements. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. And our final contestant is Zoya Garbani-Shiade, whose presentation is titled Studying the Responses of Polymeric Materials Containing Light-Activated Shape-Changing Molecules.
Hi, in the physics department at WSU, I work on some special materials that can have important impact in medicine and industry. We call them smart materials. Why do we call them smart? There are some kinds of molecules that can change their shape when they're irradiated with light. If we add these molecules to material like polymer, we can make smart materials. The smart molecule I use in my research is called dispersed red 1, or briefly DR1. And my sample is polymethyl methacrylate, or PMMA, polymer fiber that is doped with these DR1 molecules. As you see in figure 1, DR1 is elongated, and when we irradiate it with light, it bends. It can return back to the initial state by another light irradiation, or if we're letting it relax thermally. Now, the main question is that when we irradiate these samples with light, what causes the response in them? Is it heating of the polymer mediated by molecules or shape changing of DR1 molecules? Which mechanism is dominant, and how can we answer these questions? Well, the solution is to do some light-dependent and temperature-dependent experiments, model some theory based on the experimental results, and coupling them to figure out what is happening in these samples. For the experimental part, I use optics, laser, and oven. I mounted the sample between the two clamps. The laser light exerts force on the sample, and the force sensor records the data. As you see in figure 3, when light is on, a stress or force decreases, and when it is off, it returns back to the initial state. And when we heat the sample using the oven at higher temperature, force or stress decreases. The temperature-dependent results are used in the theoretical model to find the contribution of laser heating. After doing many experiments and analyzing the data using Origin software, the fitting parameters are used to interpret the responses. And finally, the results can decouple the contribution of laser heating and shape changing of DR1 molecules. As a result, I figured out that the main response in these smart samples is mainly due to laser heating, and the effect of shape changing of DR1 molecules is negligible. Now, why should we study these kinds of materials? How they can help a human to improve their living quality, and what are their applications? Their applications are really broad. They can be used in medicine as deep brain stimulation to cure Alzheimer and Parkinson. They can be used in industry, for example, in aerospace to design wings of aircrafts to change their shape when it is needed, or they can be used in robotics as grippers. They can act as human muscles, and upon irradiation, they are able to hold or release the objects. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Zoya. Thank you to all of our competitors. Y'all are all amazing. That was fantastic. We'll now allow our judges a few minutes to compile the scores as the People's Choice Award ballots pop up on the screen for the audience members. Audience, please complete these quickly so we can tally the votes. We'll then be back to announce the winners after a short intermission, so enjoy your break. Welcome back. So I just wanted to thank all of the competitors again and the judges, as well as the College of Arts and Sciences for administering the event. There's a lot of work that happened behind the scenes today, so really thank y'all for that. Competitors, please stick around following the event so that way we can take some pictures. And again, huge thank you and congratulations to all the competitors. Y'all all did an amazing job, and I feel like I learned so much from each of your presentations. So first off, I'm going to announce the People's Choice Award. This is the person who is selected by the audience, and this recipient will win a $500 award. So today's People's Choice Award is Maggie Reese. Congratulations, Maggie. All right, now for the second place winner. The second place winner will receive a $750 award. Our second place winner today is Furkan Chakmak. Congratulations, Furkan. And now, what we're all waiting for, the winner of today's College of Arts and Sciences 3-minute thesis, who will receive a $1,000 award, but will also represent the college on March 25th at the university level 3MT competition. So today's winner is Jessica Dixon. Congratulations, Jessica. Thanks everyone again for coming. Thank you again, audience, for participating and selecting the People's Choice Award. And again, thank you to our support staff for making this happen. Competitors, please stick around, but this concludes our event. Thank you all.